What were Maryland's arguments in McCulloch v. Maryland? Imagine a situation where a state attempts to assert its authority over a federal institution, challenging the very foundation of national unity and constitutional law. That is precisely what happened in the case of McCulloch versus Maryland. To understand the arguments Maryland presented, we need to explore their reasoning and legal position during the case. Maryland argued that the United States Congress did not have the constitutional authority to establish a national bank. They contended that the Constitution did not explicitly grant Congress the power to create such an institution. According to Maryland, the power to establish a bank was not among the enumerated powers listed in the Constitution. They believed that the federal government could only exercise powers that were specifically granted or that were necessarily implied from those grants. Since the Constitution did not explicitly mention the creation of a national bank, Maryland argued that Congress lacked the constitutional authority to do so. Furthermore, Maryland asserted that the state had the right to tax any business or institution operating within its borders. They claimed that the state could impose taxes on the federal bank just as it could on any private enterprise. Maryland's argument was rooted in the principle of state sovereignty, emphasizing that states retain the power to regulate and tax entities within their jurisdiction. They believed that allowing the federal government to establish a bank without state approval would undermine the authority of individual states and disrupt the balance of power between state and federal governments. Maryland also argued that the Supremacy Clause of the United States Constitution did not prevent states from taxing federal institutions. They maintained that the Constitution did not explicitly prohibit states from taxing federal agencies or operations. Therefore, Maryland contended that their tax on the national bank was lawful and within their rights as a sovereign state. In summary, Maryland's arguments centered on the idea that the federal government lacked the constitutional authority to create a national bank, and that states retain the power to tax and regulate entities within their borders. They believed that both of these actions were consistent with the principles of state sovereignty and limited federal powers, challenging the idea that the federal government could exercise implied powers beyond those explicitly listed in the Constitution.